Gene, what do you think is the future of organized religion?
Well, I think that most organizations are falling apart. We're in the biggest time of deconstruction that the world has ever seen. And I think it's going to go through a kind of morphing into a new way of being and doing. I would hope that there would be an undercurrent of an appreciation of a perennial and universal spirituality out of which these different ways and frames of seeing would then find richer and deeper ways of relating to the meaning of it all. And I think that when it is no longer the man on the cross or the man under the tree, or the man for that matter, you know, who is the vehicle through which the enlightenment and the epiphany occurs. But I would love to see a great generalization of spiritual experience happening across the board, and as people move into the greatness of this experience, I think that the nature of religion itself will change. I'm looking for a democratization of spiritual experience.
Thank you, Gene. What's your name?
David Richardson, and my question is a bit of a follow-on to the last one, but is primarily directed towards Sam. Sam, from the perspective of a neuroscientist, and knowing what we know today about the hardwiring as well as the other structures in the brain, the neurochemistry, as to our inherent bias toward wanting a causal explanation for what we see and experience around us, whether God actually exists or not in any of the organized or unorganized discussions that we've had with God, don't you feel that a belief in God is, from a neurochemical or structural basis, inevitable?
Well, apparently not. I've got a sample of at least one that I'm pretty sure about.
You want to go back on him, Adam, on that? Or?
Yes, I'd say secondarily, based on our need for tribes and society, don't you feel that again, the belief that there is no God is going to, from our own structured creation, not discussing what the cause of that creation was, but don't you feel that we're just biased in such a way that in society we will always have the belief in God as the major belief, and the belief that there is no God as a minor and presently not very vocal understanding?
Yeah, it's an interestingly provincial point of view. That we're in America, which is almost functionally a theocracy, but in Western Europe, your question actually wouldn't make sense right now. I mean, it is a massively secular part of the world, and if you go to Scandinavia, it flips entirely. It's something like a majority, 60 to, depending on how you ask the question, 60 to 80% of people in Denmark, for instance, are atheists. I mean, they do not believe, they treat the God of Abraham the way we treat Zeus. And that is, just refresh the browser in your brain and realize that those are actually equivalent. And we are in a shocking circumstance where most people in our society are really worried about Zeus. And you pick up the New York Times tomorrow, and I guarantee you that the international section of the paper will more or less read like, what are the crazy Muslims doing today? But if you realize that what they're doing is on the basis of a belief that is just like a belief in the gods of Mount Olympus. I mean, imagine if you drawing cartoons of Hercules could get you killed.
I heard Deepak mention that there are deeper ways of knowing, and I get the impression that this is based on intuition and the subjective. And I'd like to know, if we don't use the objective scientific method, how do we distinguish what is true from what we simply want to be true?
What's your name?
Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. Deepak, have at it.
I think science is based on a subject-object split. I'm the observer, and that's the observed. And it does extremely well based on the subject-object split. I am hoping that the truth will be found when we actually develop a science of consciousness that goes beyond the subject-object split, because after all, nature is one. Nature does not decide that this is the subject and that's the object. Nature says that both the subject and the object are my activity. So my prayer is that science will evolve to include consciousness in its evolution. I want to say that a science that does not diminish the richness of human experience to data on a graph and end up being so reductionism will be incomplete. It has to go to the next level. At the same time, I think a theology that is based on primitive ideas that were born in the Bronze and Iron Age are no longer relevant. So my hope is that this conversation on this wonderful location on the birthday of Einstein will say, how can we create a conversation between the Einsteins of the world and the sages of the world?
Sam?
Actually, I think I want to treat the question that was asked by the woman who asked about near-death experience and the use of the word light in the Old Testament. Because it seems to me really to come back to the books in terms of general relevance to world events. We are really prisoners of literature right now. We are constrained to talk either explicitly about these books or in some vague conformity to these books. And these books were written by people who every person in this room has more access to information and scientific knowledge and just what is now basic common sense than the authors of the Bible and the Quran. And in fact, there's not a person in this room who has ever met a person whose worldview is as narrow, just by the sheer time in which they appeared in history, as the worldviews of Abraham or Moses or Jesus or Muhammad. And until we grapple with that fact and honestly talk about honestly commit ourselves to a 21st century conversation about the possibilities of human well-being, we're just going to be at sea, and we're going to be trying to figure out whether we should pass laws about gay marriage and whether we should ban blasphemy at the UN and whether we should allow newspapers to print cartoons about the Prophet Muhammad, and we're going to just be bewildered by the relentless certainties of people who are obviously lying to themselves.
Let me thank Deepak for making it possible for ABC to be here and make this a national event. I owe you that, Deepak, and believe it or not, amongst the new atheist movement, I'm considered the accommodationist, so you got off easy. And, believe me. Even though we have our specific differences, much of what you describe, without the language stuff, is a big improvement on the Bronze Age religions that we've dealt with. I'm in favor of anything that expands the circle of sentiments, anything that leads people to be more cooperative and pro-social and altruistic and so on, less violent, less tribal. And so to the extent that we can do whatever that takes, then I'm in favor of it. It doesn't have to be some particular thing I like, just as long as it works on a pragmatic level to make the world a better place for more people in more places more of the time.
Sam Harris, Michael Shermer, Deepak Chopra, Gene Houston, thank you, all of you. We appreciate it. And thank you to everybody for coming. It was a great debate. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thank you, Dan. Pleasure.